Every Easter morning, Mom made a fresh Easter bread. So I decided this year to put a little twist on it and make a cherry almond sweet bread. It's absolutely delicious, super easy to make. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today we're going to make a cherry almond Easter bread. But no worries if you don't like the flavors of cherry and almond, you can adapt this recipe, make it cinnamon raisin. You can do so many things with this basic recipe. So you'll be sure to make something absolutely delicious for you and your family. First thing we're going to do is get the yeast proofed. So to do that, I have a 1/4 cup of warm water. You want the temperature to be somewhere between 105 to 110 degrees. Anything above 115 will kill the yeast, so you need to make sure that your water is not too hot for this. I have a 1/4 cup of the warm water, 1 tablespoon of yeast, and I know that seems like a lot of yeast, but you need that much in this recipe because it's a sweet bread. And I'll go over that in just a second. Let me go ahead and stir this in. We're also, oh, you know what I can do? We're gonna use a teaspoon of the sugar to help kind of give the yeast some extra food. That helps it bloom a little bit faster. Mix that up and just set that to the side. Takes about 5 minutes or so, and you'll see it start to really puff up, and that is proofing it or blooming the yeast. All right, so because we're doing a sweet bread and we're gonna add sugar, more sugar than you would ordinarily add into any bread, you need to increase the amount of yeast so that you get the rise you want. Sugar in small quantities is food for yeast, but when you add extra sugar, like we're gonna do, it can actually inhibit the yeast from rising. So we kind of counterbalance that by increasing the yeast to make up for the added sugar that we're gonna use. I have 3 cups of all-purpose flour here, and I'm gonna add to the bowl, but I'm only gonna add about 2.5 cups. I always like to leave out a 1/2 cup so that I can add in more and go by the texture of the bread, not so much the ingredients. Now, the best way to bake is by weighing out all the ingredients. That is the most accurate way to do it, but a lot of us don't have kitchen scales in our home. So I'm gonna use just cup measurement, and I go by the look of the bread. You can't go wrong when you go by what the food tells you it needs. So I'm gonna add in about 2.5 cups, and I'm not gonna be exact here. There we go. Leave that out. We're gonna add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We can add in our sugar. That is 1/3 cup of sugar. And of course we put a teaspoon in there. Make sure we get all that salt out. Then we're gonna add in a little bit of cream. Now we're starting off with a bread that is a brioche style bread. It's what's considered an enriched bread because we use eggs and butter and cream in this bread. And of course the sugar, make it sweet. It's so delicious. But first I'm gonna go ahead and just mix all this up just on low, just to get it all mixed in. Then we can go ahead and start putting in our eggs. You can already see the yeast starting to puff up, but I'm gonna leave it just like that for a minute. So I have 3 large eggs. We're gonna use 2 full eggs and then 1 egg yolk in this recipe. And I always crack my eggs into a bowl before I add them to anything, because in case I get a shell in there, you know, I can get it out pretty easy. So go ahead and put in 1 egg. 2 eggs, and then let me grab this bowl over here. Now, you can save the egg white if you want. You can brush it on the top. So let's say you wanted to just make a basic brioche bread, not a sweet bread. You can do that with this recipe, omit the sugar, and keep the egg white to mix with a little bit of water and brush it on top at the end. We don't need to do that for this recipe because it doesn't matter if we get a browning on our bread because we're gonna put an icing over it. Get all that in. All right. 2 tablespoons of heavy cream. Now you could use milk instead if you wanted to. I just don't ordinarily keep milk on hand that much, so I always have cream, so I put cream in the recipe. But if you wanted to use whole milk, you certainly can. Use about 1.5 tablespoons, and then go by the look of the bread. So if the bread's too dry, put in a little bit more milk. If it's too wet, put in a little more flour. All right, so now that that's going, let's go ahead and get our yeast in. It's looking great. It's all puffed up and beautiful. So we're gonna go ahead and pour that in. And now for the butter. You're gonna use 1/2 cup of melted butter. Make sure it's not too hot, because again, if your butter's too hot, then it can also kill the yeast. And that's why I add it in at the end. So I add it in after I have the yeast mixed in with the bread, with the dough. And now we're gonna add that in. And it's 1/2 cup or 1 stick of salted butter, but you could use unsalted if you wanted, that's no problem. All right, so now we have a really, really wet dough. And that's fine. That's what I expect at this point, because we haven't added in all the flour. Scrape down the sides a little bit. And I'm gonna add in some cherry flavoring as well. I use 1/2 tablespoon of cherry emulsion. That's what I like to use. But you could use an extract too. I would start with 2 teaspoons of an extract if you can find a cherry extract. Or you could use vanilla. I mean, you don't have to use the cherry. You could use vanilla. You could use almond if you wanted more of an almond flavor. So really, you can use any type of flavoring you want. I'm just gonna make a cherry almond version. I'm gonna use 1/2 tablespoon. I found that gave a really nice cherry flavor to the bread. Now, you can make this without a stand mixer, but let me tell you, it's a lot easier if you have one. But if you don't, or if you have a bread machine, you can mix it up in the bread machine as well. But if not, you can knead it by hand. It just takes a little bit of time, and it's a wet bread, so it's a little bit more difficult. It gets stuck onto your hands pretty easily. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and start adding in some more flour until we get the right consistency. And then I will let the stand mixer mix this up for about 10 minutes. So that would be probably about a 30-minute kneading by hand. So you can see it would take a little bit of time, but it's definitely doable. If you wanted to knead it by hand, make sure that you have a clean, dry surface and a lot of flour on the surface. Now, I'm not talking about an inch thick or anything, but make sure you have plenty of flour and flour your hands so you limit the amount of sticking. All right, it's looking good, but it's still sticking to the sides here. In fact, let me go ahead and turn this off and show you. Let me do this. There we go. It's looking beautiful though already. All right, so it's still wet and it's still sticking to the bottom here a little bit when it pulls away. So that tells me there's not enough flour, but we're getting close because as I pick it up, it's not sticking to my fingers. So that is good. So we're getting really close. And in my test batches of this bread, I've used pretty much all of the 3 cups of flour, but humidity will change that a little bit. And how you measure your flour changes too. If you're not weighing it, sometimes you'll be a little heavier with your measurement, sometimes you'll be a little lighter. So it's really easy to go by the look of the bread. We are getting really, really, really close here. In fact, I'm gonna stop for a minute. So I still have about a 1/4 cup left, and I'm gonna wait a minute here. Turn up the speed just a little bit. Okay, that looks great. So I am happy with that texture. I'll pull some out so you can see what I mean. So it's very, very soft, but it's not sticking to my hands at all. It looks beautiful. So we are good to go. We're gonna go 10 minutes kneading on medium speed. All right, so while that's kneading, let me talk about the cherries real quick. Because I have them draining here and drying. This is one 16-ounce jar of maraschino cherries. They've been sitting here for about an hour and they're pretty dry. But the problem is if you add them to your dough just like this, they end up getting the dough too wet, then they don't incorporate well into the dough. So I'm going to use the rest of this flour, a quarter cup of flour, to toss them in the flour before I add them to the dough. So what I'm gonna do is lay these out on some paper towels just to get as much moisture off as I can, and then I'll toss them in the flour, we'll add them to the dough, and then we're ready to let our dough rise. All right, so we've been kneading for just about 3 to 4 minutes, and I took a peek in and I'm noticing that the bread is sticking to the bottom a little bit here. Let me show you, because this is important when you're making a bread and going by consistency of the dough. You want to look to see, is it sticking here to the bottom? So that's a little bit too sticky there. And that happens sometimes. And that's why in all my test batches, I've used the whole amount of flour. But since I'm gonna use this bowl to toss these cherries in, I just grabbed about 1/3 of a cup, probably just 1/4 cup. I'm only gonna add in though 1 tablespoon at a time because it does not take a lot of flour to fix the consistency. So just pop it in there, put your mixer back down and go back on the medium speed and keep going. Sometimes you have to add 1 tablespoon, sometimes 0 tablespoons, sometimes 3 tablespoons. So just, go by the look, and if it's sticking too much, add a little flour. If it's too dry, add a little milk. I think we can go 1 more tablespoon here. All right, that's looking good. All right, so we have about 5 more minutes to go or so of the 10-minute knead time. I'm not gonna toss these in the flour until just before I add them in. Otherwise, the flour is just going to get all sticky with the residual moisture and sugar of the cherry. So I do it at the last minute. So I'll just leave these sit here and kind of press down on them a little bit. All right, so the dough has been in there for about 10 minutes. Now it's sticking just slightly to the bottom, but I'm not worried about that because remember, we're gonna be adding in floured covered cherries here. But I did wanna take the dough out, or at least some of it, so I can show you. It's such a nice dough to work with. I love a brioche, oh my gosh. All right, so it's nice and soft, okay? It's a kind of a wetter bread, I guess you'd say, softer bread than some of the other doughs. I should say dough, it's softer dough. But it's just gorgeous and it does not stick to your hands. If it's sticking to your hands, you don't have enough flour. And so put in another tablespoon or 2 of flour and let it knead a little bit. But we are good to go. And now we can add in our cherries. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get these into the flour. You could also use dried cherries if you wanted. It's a little different of a texture in the bread, but you could certainly do that. Or craisins would work really well in this recipe if you wanted to do a cranberry type of bread. So really, you can get really creative with this. All right, so once these cherries are incorporated. I could have also used like a sour cherry too, but traditionally my mom always put some sort of a sweeter fruit instead of a more of a savory type of fruit, which those sour cherries are not sweet at all. All right, so we're just gonna throw these right in the bowl. Now this can kind of can be a little hard to do, but I found that it works okay in the mixer. You can also knead them in by hand, but we're gonna give this a shot. Again here, on low. Definitely go on low speed. see if it's gonna pull those in. If it doesn't, I'll just do it by hand. So it's breaking them up a little bit, which is what we wanted. But it doesn't look like it's doing its job. I've tested this recipe a couple of times and I've done it 2 different ways. One time it worked really well with the mixer. Another time it didn't work with the mixer, so I did it by hand. Looks like it's not gonna work really well with the mixer, so we're gonna do it by hand, and that is no problem. It's gonna get the cherries in there a little bit easier. So I'm gonna put some flour down on my board here and go ahead and just pull this out. So the cherries do get this bread moist, okay? Because they are full of liquid. So you definitely need to have some flour available for this part. And we're just gonna fold these cherries in. Knead them in until we get them incorporated into the dough. Now I'm gonna have whole cherries in this dough, which I've always had them broken up before. So that's gonna be kind of interesting. We'll see how it works. I mean, if it works, it's gonna be great. I hope it works. All right, that looks good. All right, so now all the cherries are into the dough. The dough is not too moist. Looks really good. And now we can use the same bowl. I'm just gonna push those in. I hope this works with the whole cherries. We'll see. All right, so we've got the dough. All the cherries are inside. No worries there if someone's poking out. Now we need to let it rise. So to do that, I'm gonna go ahead and leave this flour in the bottom there. And we're gonna cover it with some cling wrap, or you can use a wet towel. You can let this rise for a couple hours on your countertop if your house is not too cold, or you can use the dehydration function if you have the XL oven, which I'm gonna do. I'm gonna set it on 105 and go in there for about 90 minutes. It takes a longer time to have this dough rise, and you want it to double in size, and that's because of the added sugar. So it takes a little bit longer, okay? Or you can do it in the oven. You can turn your oven on and let it just heat up just a little bit, and then turn the oven off and put the dough in there to rise. So it's gonna take between 90 minutes and 2 hours for this dough to rise. And then we're gonna get to forming our loaves of bread, and we're gonna braid them. So it's fun. This is a fun recipe. All right, so it's been about an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you can see that the bread has definitely doubled in size, which is exactly what we want. Now, I changed the bowls. I should have done that on camera before I put this into dehydrate or proof, honestly, but I didn't show you guys that. So this is a bigger bowl than what I originally had it in. So you can see it's definitely has increased in volume there, and that's what we want. All right, now, before we start to punch that down and get this formed into our loaves of braided bread, I'm gonna put a little bit of flour here on my work surface. And then you can just move the dough around and it will deflate. All right, looks good. Now what I like to do is weigh the entire amount of dough right now. So I'm gonna turn on my scale. Now you don't have to do this if you don't have a scale, don't worry about it. So it's about 2 pounds, 6 ounces. So what I'm gonna do is divide this into 1 pound, 3 ounce pieces. So we have 2 loaves, and then those get separated into 3 little balls that we then roll out and braid. So let me just sort of estimate here what the middle would be. See how. I know some of these cherries that are really whole are gonna create a problem when we go to braid it, but don't worry about that. I'm gonna show you how to deal with that. We're just gonna break them up a little bit. All right, let's see how close I came. 1 pound, 3 ounces. Perfect. Okay. So now I want to separate this into 3 balls of dough as well. All right, so now I'm gonna set these aside here. We're gonna work with one at a time. So this is when I wanna kind of feel, are there any really completely whole cherries in there? And I'm just gonna break them up with my fingers a little bit. And then put a little bit more flour down so this doesn't stick. And get it into a ball. Kind of pinch it together on the underside. Then we're going to roll it out into a log. You want that to be between 12 and 14 inches in length. All right, so then just go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth until you get it into a long strand or rope. All right, there we go. So we have 3 equal length ropes here that are about between 12 and 14 inches. And I have one that has a lot of cherries kind of popping out here. I'm gonna put that one in the middle. And the reason being is that it will protect those cherries from the direct heat as I braid. So hopefully this will work out well. All right, so now that we've got those, now we're gonna cinch the tops together. You can do this any which way you want, but I just usually take this one side over and one side under and just sort of create like a little, just pinch it together. And then we have the 3 ropes that we're gonna braid. Then I just carefully take this over to the left there, move this one over. If it's not coming together, or not staying together at the end, it's because of the flour. I can take a little bit of that egg wash that we still have from the egg white and use that to help. And then just go again. So I'll worry about the end in a minute. Let's get this braided up. Now, one of the great things about this recipe, and I'm gonna turn this so that the part of the fruit is to the bottom. One of the beauties of this recipe is that you can make it up to this point, put it on a tray, cover it with saran wrap, and you can put it in the refrigerator until the next day and just proof it right in the refrigerator. Or you can make it all in one day and do the second proof now, that's what we're gonna do. But I have also done it where I put it into the refrigerator overnight, took it out about 30 minutes before I wanted to bake it, and it worked perfectly. All right, so now that I have the braid done, you can see, I'm gonna fix this end a little bit. So I'm gonna grab my egg white that I still have here. I'm gonna put a little bit of water in there, and I'm gonna use a pastry brush, and I'm just gonna moisten this a little bit and try to get it so that it stays together. All right, so let me go do that. I'm gonna do a reverse braid real quick because I'm gonna get it a little bit tighter here at the end. That looks good. I'm gonna do the same thing for the other side. If there's any full cherries at the very bottom where you're trying to pinch it together, you can remove them because they will prevent it from staying together. All right, so then just carefully lift it up and put it on your sheet pan. This is a quarter pan because I'm gonna be baking this in the Ninja Foodi XL oven, which is right behind me. But you could do one large loaf too. If you wanted to use a half pan, you could certainly just make those ropes about 28 inches long or so and, braid it up and have one large piece of bread. But I like to do it this way, and so I have 2 different ones. I can freeze one for another day and eat one. All right, now I'm gonna cover this, and I'm gonna use the same wrap that I used on the bowl because that's perfectly fine. And I'm gonna cover this and I'm gonna get it back into the oven to dehydrate for another hour to 2 hours. And then it will rise again, and then we'll be ready to bake it. Like I said though, you could put this just covered just like this in your refrigerator and leave it overnight, then take it out for about 30 minutes before you want to bake it, and it works just fine. It'll rise in the refrigerator just at a slower rate. So I proofed both of these loaves of bread at the same time in the Ninja Foodi XL oven on the dehydration function at 105 degrees. It worked perfectly. They've doubled in size. They look gorgeous. But remember, this took an hour, but you could leave them on the counter and it would take about 90 minutes to maybe 2 hours to get them to double in size. So either way is perfectly fine in this recipe. Or you could use your oven too on warm, or heat it and then turn it off so it does not get too hot and kill the yeast. But these are absolutely gorgeous. Now, this one looks better. I always end up with one that looks better than the other. So, you know, go figure. That's the way it's been on all my test batches, and I don't know why. On this one, you can see where there's some separation, where as it was rising, the dough kind of pulled apart. Don't try to fix that at this point, because if you do any manipulation with your bread right now, it's gonna collapse again. You're gonna undo that rise. So no matter what it looks like at this point, we're gonna bake it. Now, to bake, you can bake in a regular oven at 350 degrees that is preheated for 30 minutes, or you can use a convection style oven, which I'm using the Ninja Foodi XL oven, and bake on 2 levels, 325 for 30 minutes, and I'm preheating it for a full 10 minutes before I put the bread in. The Ninja Foodi, both the flip oven, because you could do this in the flip oven too if you just wanted to make one, but in the Ninja Foodi flip oven or the XL oven, there's a quick preheat, like I think 160 seconds, and this might be 90 seconds, but you know what? It's not hot enough. It's not long enough to really get the heat that you want in the oven to cook something like a bread. So a full 10 minutes, I preheat on 325 on the bake function, and then I'll pop these both in. We'll go 30 minutes. We'll get them out. We'll get them cooling. We'll make our glaze, and then we'll do our decorations, and we'll be ready to taste it. All right, so 30 minutes is up. The bread is done. One of them is darker, and that is because I forgot to select the levels on the Ninja Foodi XL oven back there. So you can set, when you're doing 2 levels, you can actually set it to 2 level. So I think it manages the heat flow better, the fan and stuff like that. It does something, because my other batches, one did not turn out darker. But you know what? It doesn't matter. We're gonna glaze it and decorate it anyway, so I am not worried about it. All right, so now that they are all baked up, and if you wanted to check the temperature, you can check the temperature of the bread. It should be around 200 degrees, and that'll be fine if you weren't sure if it was done. Now we want to take it off and put it onto the cooling rack to cool. And the way that I like to do this is to have it cool about 75%. So not completely cold, but 75%, so that I can put the glaze over, and the glaze sort of melts into it a little bit, but then doesn't melt all the way off. Because if you put the glaze on right now, it would just totally, you know, slip right off the sides. So we're gonna give that some time to cool down. It's gonna take about 20 minutes, and we'll make up our glaze, and we'll get it all decorated, and then I'll taste it. All right, so let's make the almond glaze. And how I'm gonna make that is with 1 cup of confectioner's sugar, a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. I'm gonna use an almond emulsion, or you could use an extract, that would be fine, and 2 tablespoons of room temperature butter, but not melted, okay? All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is add in the cream. And we're gonna add in the almond emulsion. I use 1 teaspoon. You can adjust that to your liking. I want a real nice almond flavor in this. There we go. I've also used a little bit of corn syrup in the past when I've made this glaze, but I've decided to skip it and see how it works out. So let's find out if we can omit that. I don't usually like glazes that are made just with confectioner's sugar, because they are just so sweet, but I do find the addition of the butter helps that. It kind of brings in a little bit of a buttercream flavor to it, and it really does help. All right, so now you can make your icing as thin or as thick as you like. If you wanted it a little bit thinner, you could certainly add a little bit more cream, or even water would be fine. But I think this looks like a good consistency. It's gonna leave a nice white icing on our bread. All right, now I'm gonna dump in the butter and just whisk that in. This is a little different. Not everybody makes glazes like this, but I found that it really works beautifully. It will also thicken this up quite a bit, actually. But that's good, because then we get a nice icing. All right, that looks really good. Now we have to taste it. That's really nice. The almond flavor is amazing. So the way you decorate this is any which way you want. There's no rules here. If you wanted to have a thinner glaze instead of a thicker icing and just pour it over the top, that works. I've done that before. If you want the thicker icing like I just made here today, and you could put it on just in strategic places, like if you wanted to cover certain things up, you could just sort of put it, I'm not using the right tool, but you know what I mean. You could just put it right on these places here. You can go straight down the middle. I usually just don't pay much attention and just let it sort of go where it goes, because I think what I like is the thicker white with the thinner white. So I just go right over the top and it's just barely warm and it'll start to melt and go where it wants to go, and that's how I do it. Now you could put cherries on top. I mean, you could do anything you want. But what I'm gonna do for this one is just put some toasted sliced almonds. Just sort of put those over the top here. It's like maybe a tablespoon. Whenever I'm making anything that has any kind of nuts or even nut flavoring, I like to make sure I show that. So I like to put the nuts on top. That way if anyone has any allergies, they immediately will say, oh, wait a minute. You know, can't have that. All right, now we can just throw some of these M&Ms on top, or you could put sprinkles on top if you wanted to. Decorate however you want. I'm not gonna decorate this one because I'm gonna freeze it undecorated and take it next week when I go to visit my mom. So I'm not gonna decorate that one, but we've got this one and now I can cut it and try it. There we go. Cherry almond Easter bread. All right, so let's go ahead and cut it. Now you could pull pieces off if you wanted. I mean, you can serve it however you want, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut it sort of down this natural line where the braids are. And open it out so we can see. So you see some cherries, and you're gonna see places without cherries. That's perfectly normal. Hopefully every piece will have a cherry in there though. Look at that, it's gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Oh my gosh. You know I'm gonna take the side with the cherries in there, right? When it's still warm. Oh my gosh, look at that. This is my favorite bread. Oh my gosh. Wow. So if you've never had a bread like this, think about a cinnamon roll, you know, that's really like light and fluffy. Of course, this is just cherry almond. Oh, it's delicious. The layers just are so flaky. Absolutely perfect. I know this one takes a little bit of time. It is so worth it though, especially if you want to make part of it one day, put it in the refrigerator and then bake it in the morning so you can have a nice warm Easter bread, you know, for breakfast. And then you don't have to wait for Easter. You can make it anytime you want. Change up the flavors. You don't like cherry and almond, do cinnamon raisin. That would be delicious. Or orange and cranberry would be so good. As always, make it yours, make it delicious, and keep it real.